Alright, so now we're going to talk about Salter-Harris fractures, or growth plate fractures. And the first thing we should do is go over some anatomy. And so I'm going to assume that you're going to have the bone in this orientation with the long part of the bone here and the end over here. So this top part is called, this part here is called the metaphysis. The growth plate itself is called the growth plate or physis. And then this lower part here is called the epiphysis. The shaft here is also called the diaphysis, but we're not really going to be talking about this so much now. So, you got it? Metaphysis, physis, epiphysis. And this is the growth plate. This is where most of the bone growth occurs, and the blood supply to here comes from the epiphysis. So you know that if this is destroyed, you're going to destroy blood supply to the growth plate and then affect the bone's growth. So you know orthopedists, they like to classify everything, and growth plate fractures are no exception. And so there's actually 9 different kinds of Salter-Harris fractures, but traditionally we really only talk about 5 of them. And there's a mnemonic to remember those 5, and that mnemonic actually spells the word Salter. And each one of these corresponds to one of the different kinds of fractures, except of course or the letter E, which doesn't count. So a type 1 Salter fracture is going to be one that comes through the growth plate, and that S stands for separated. And so what you might see on the x-ray is that this space is actually opened. So it can be very subtle to see on the x-ray, but this space actually widens, and that's type 1. Now at type 2, the A is going to stand for above, so the fracture is going to be above the growth plate. And so then it would look like this. So type 3 then stands for lower. And as you can probably tell, then that would mean that the fracture is going to be through the epiphysis. And this is usually going to be a joint side here, so this is probably going to also be an intra-articular fracture. Now type 4, the T stands for through and through. So you can see the fracture goes through both the epiphysis and the metaphysis, and obviously through the growth plate. And it's going to be an unstable fracture because this piece is pretty much separated. And finally, the type 5 fracture, that R stands for either rammed, as this epiphysis is going to be rammed into the other one, or the way I learned it, it stands for crushed because the growth plate is going to be crushed. So you can see here that this epiphysis got rammed into that piece, and there's really very little space in there. Now, these fractures were initially classified this way as more of a prognostic tool. So the further down you go, the worse the prognosis is. With these Salter 1s doing very well, and the Salter 5s, future growth may be compromised. Salter 1s you might be able to get away with just simple casting, and this would likely require operative repair. Okay, so now let's go through some x-rays and test what you've learned. So this is x-ray number 1. Take a look at it and decide what kind of Salter fracture this would be. Alright, let's go to the next one. Here's the second x-ray. Take a peek and decide what Salter fracture you think this is. And feel free to pause the video if you need to. Okay, let's move on to the third one. Here's number 3. Let's move on to number 4. Here is the 4th x-ray. Okay, let's go to the next one. Number 5. Okay, next one. Number 6. Okay, next one. Here's the 7th one. Okay, let's move on. Here's number 8. Alright, next one. And finally, number 9. And that's all of them. And for extra credit, there's 2 more questions. What is the most common Salter fracture? And what is the least common Salter fracture? Alright, that's it for Salter-Harris fractures, and I'll make another video going over the answers to these questions. Alright, see you later.